Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Mandy Grace. Let the fun begin. No, I am planning on trying to read at least one craft book every month. At least. I'm not going to be reading more than that. One. I'm hoping to do it every month is the point and not miss a month. Anyway, that's what this video is. I'm going to dive into one of the craft books. And that would be Story Genius! How to use brain science to go beyond outlining and write a riveting novel. Before you waste 3 years writing 327 pages that go nowhere. By Lisa Cron. Cron? Cron. I'm not good with names. Anyway, we're going to get into this. I have only ever read Save the Cat. But Save the Cat completely changed the way that I view stories, and it was amazing, and I love it. So I'm hoping that as I read more craft books, I will glean more inspiring knowledge, and will improve my writing even more. Only 22 pages in, but she's not telling me anything that I don't already know yet. She's basically explaining what a story really is beyond the plot or the good or bad writing or whatever. What it all boils down to is the internal story arc of the characters. But none of this has been new information. Like, I already knew that the internal story was the point, and I already knew about how powerful stories are and why people connect with them. So none of this has been mind-blowing. It's mostly good stuff, and I don't disagree with it, but it's not mind-blowing. And also, it's starting to get redundant, because she's trying to make the point about what story really is, but because I already know what story is, 22 pages of her being like, this is what a story is, this is what a story is, this is what it actually is. I'm just like, why are you beating me over the head with this? Please stop. Especially because it's very, I mean, the chapter I'm in right now, she's debunking common writing myths. And I haven't necessarily agreed with the ones that I've read yet, but she's not very gracious, I guess, so far with her debunking of, you know, popular things. Like, let's see, what is the ones that I've read? Oh, the great writing one. Books do not have to be well written for people to connect with the story, which is obviously absolutely true. I just did the Biology Has Us at Hello, and I'm about to dive into the myth of pantsing. Anyway, I'm a little concerned about getting into things like the myth of pantsing, because the first ones that I read with the great writing is not what draws people into stories, which is not. And then the Biology Has Us at Hello, both of them were very overbearing. Like, this is the correct answer. Look at the correct answer. You must be dumb if you don't see the correct answer. And so I don't really want to get into the next sections, because the ones that we've gone over so far, I agreed with her, but we're easing into the ones that I don't know if I agree with her or not, because I have pantsed in the past before. So I'm curious. I don't know, I feel like I'm getting defensive, that's what it is. I've agreed with what she said so far, and even so I'm defensive because of the way that she's presenting her information. It just feels very confrontational to me. Maybe it's not, but that's the way it feels to me. Okay, I highlighted this sentence just because it resonated very deeply. This is my life. There have been so many things over my life where people wanted me to explain to them how I was doing something so that they could also do it, and I was like, I just do it. I don't know. Which isn't exactly what she's talking about, but that's what I thought of. There are some prompts, so this is what I'm going to do now. I'm doing the prompts with Messiah's story, so I basically have almost an entire first draft already written, so I have a lot to draw from, but I'm trying not to draw from it and actually do the prompts, which actually did open my eyes a little bit. It was all about acceptance, and after going through these prompts, it's really not what the story is about anymore. I mean, it kind of is, but differently. It's a very different acceptance that my story is about now. Which it sort of already was, because this already plays a role in the first draft. And I wanted it to play a bigger role in, you know, as I revise and do all of that good stuff. I wanted to flesh it out and make it a big part of Messiah's story, but I didn't initially outline it. It wasn't in my Save the Cat outline, it was just in my first draft. Halfway through, I discovered it and then put notes in that I would add it in, if that makes sense. I knew once I started writing that I wanted Messiah to be fighting for more than herself. But doing these prompts just made it so much more clear. Day 2 going through this book, I didn't learn any new information with what I read yesterday, but I did have a kind of sort of breakthrough when I was doing the prompt things. So we'll see what happens today. This portion here about not writing a biography of your characters from the moment they were born until the moment they die. This is exactly why I feel odd and cringe when I reread my original Robin Hood series, because this is what I did. At that point in time, I hadn't read any books on craft and was just making it up as I went along because I was pretty sure I knew what I was doing. But this is what I did with those books, and I hate reading them for that reason. There's other reasons too, but that's the biggest one. So, yeah, that's what this section is making me think of. My thoughts on Story Genius right now, about halfway through the book. First of all, we're getting along much better. I am not nearly as defensive as I was when I first started reading it. But that aside, nothing that I've been reading is necessarily new information to me. She's been explaining what story is and all about focusing on the why and not just the what of the story, and why humans crave that sort of experience and connection, which is all great and it's a good reminder, but none of it is new information, so I haven't had any like aha or eureka moments, which I definitely did when I was reading Save the Cat. And I don't know if, you know, I'm not having any of those moments reading this one, because I already did with Save the Cat, so now it's old hat. But anyway, it's all a good reminder and it's very interesting to read. And I know I showed a clip doing the writing exercises where I had boiled down what my story really was about, but that isn't actually new either. And I know I didn't really explain this when I did that clip of the writing exercise, but I'm gonna explain it now, because when I outlined with Save the Cat, I outlined like 3 different times because I was trying to decide what my story was, and I was doing research about King Arthur during that time, so I kept getting various ideas and then outlining with that and seeing what would work. And then I started writing the story for NaNoWriMo, and about halfway-ish through the story is when I started to get the idea that there was something deeper going on. So the initial story was just about getting the throne back. Like, the magical princess is passed over as heir and it's given to her brother, and she doesn't take to that very well, and she fights to get her throne back, and that was what she was fighting for. That was her why. But about halfway through the first draft writing it, I started to get an inkling that there was something else going on, and so I already have scenes in the first draft which we could go look at where she interacts with other magical people and realizes that as the princess she has not had to deal with the hatred against magic that is rife in her kingdom the way that her subjects have. And because there's this whole thing going on in Asgard between the magical and non-magical people, and some people are, you know, fine with whatever, but some people have been crazy. So like, Messiah's grandfather was murdered by a magical person because apparently Grandpa wasn't very nice to the magic people and they retaliated. And then her mother was murdered by non-magical people because her mother was advocating for the magical people. And it's a mess, okay? The whole thing is a mess. So I already had that in my world building notebook over there, and I had put some scenes into the first draft. But I hadn't focused on it because it wasn't in my outline that I was following, so it was just sort of in the back of my mind and in a couple of scenes, and I had made a note that when I go back to revisions, I was going to make it a bigger thing. It was just when I did the Story Genius exercise that I realized that it was not just a bigger thing, but it's like, it's the thing. It is the thing. Because in the initial story, Messiah's whole journey is just about her. Like, she's passed over for the throne. She fights to get it back, and then she comes to a place of acceptance. She's not gonna be queen. It's fine. But as I was writing the first draft, I started to see that really her journey is more, she's fighting for herself for the throne because, you know, her pride is hurt that she's been passed over. And then as the story progresses, she realized that she really needs to be fighting for everyone else. Anyway, but the transition from I want the throne back because it's my birthright to I want the throne because I am the best option for all of these people. Anyway, I still need to flesh out some of the ideas rolling around in here, but I did kind of want to point out that they weren't new ideas because I read Story Genius and was like, oh, this is what I should be doing. Like, I already had that, and you can read my first draft and see it there. It's just I hadn't made it the focal point, I guess. It is a miserable day. Was supposed to snow. Definitely did not snow. It's just rainy and miserable. So I am going to snuggle up in my bed and read some more Story Genius. I am really enjoying this story prompts and trying to dig into the internal story. I had an internal story with the Save the Cat outline when I first started this book, which was mainly like about Messiah's ambition and then learning to be content and accept what life threw at her, I guess. Which I don't hate, but it wasn't strong enough. It wasn't deep enough. I don't know. It wasn't working. And then when I was writing the first draft, I had this whole idea of fighting for herself and then learning to be like a champion of the people, which I don't hate either, but it was still, it wasn't all connecting. And doing the prompts with the Story Genius, I've started to really dig into something that I think is actually going to work. It can, like, the story can still incorporate the first two ideas in some fashion, but I'm really liking where I'm going with this idea of being safe. Like, that's what's driving her, because her mother, the queen, was assassinated, and her grandfather was assassinated years before that. Welcome to being, you know, royalty in Asgard. It's a wonderful world. Anyway, so there's that kind of fear, but there's also, like, the fear and hatred against magic and the people who wield magic is very prevalent, and even though she's protected from most of it as the princess, she doesn't see it, and so there's that sort of pressure and fear in her because of that. And so I'm liking the idea that her whole motivation, whether she realizes it or not, her whole motivation is about being safe. And in her mind, the safest place to be is at the top of the food chain. And she knows that she's the heir to the throne, so she's pretty confident because she's going to be at the top of the food chain. She's gonna be fine. I'm liking this. I'm liking this a lot better. I can play with this. I think overall I really liked this book. It did force me to dig deeper into the story than the Save the Cat beat sheet does. Because the beat sheet definitely touches on the internal story. But this really makes you dig into it and figure it out, which was really great. I'm still a little put off by the beginning of this book and the way it tells you about the internal story, because it's very I don't know, aggressive. I prefer how I guess Save the Cat explains the internal story, or what this book would call the third rail. But I do like how this one has all the writing prompts to like dig into your character's past and figure out what is really going on inside, so that when you start the story you really do have a thorough understanding of what the internal story is. Because I really had to think about it, especially since I'd already written basically the entire first draft. So I had the story, and I was just sort of like answering the prompts, and then at some point I couldn't answer the prompt anymore because my answers didn't work. They didn't work with what, you know, Lisa was throwing at me. So then I had to actually dig. Man, it got a little rough. It got hard. I'm glad I did it though. We kind of ended up with a enemies to lovers sort of relationship, but I think it worked. It definitely made me think very hard about the story. Also, I definitely want to use the Story Genius for book 2, so that I'm starting not with a written story, but with something that's completely blank, basically, so that I can actually go through the Story Genius prompts and do them correctly.